are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the duration of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will allow for public comment. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So I believe that concludes the announcement. And turning to the agenda, the first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have Matt Fee, looks like he's trying to join us, so let's get him in here. Matt, say hello when you're here.
Hello, I'm here, I think.
Great, yeah, we see you, there you are. So the meetings from September 8th, Vince, do we usually put those up on the screen? And if anybody has any corrections or comments on the minutes?
Move approval.
Do I have a second?
Just 1 second, Mary.
Yes,
sorry. I'm just going to catch a couple of quick corrections if nobody else minds. Just going to add Arcadis and remove, everyone can see this. I'm just going to add the or to Arcadis. And I'm also just going to remove one extra word and that's it. It's just minor edits. Complete.
Okay, did we have any other comments or corrections on the minutes? I did note that we approved both versions of the logo. Did we get that fixed? I don't know if your fingers were that fast, Vince, or?
No. Yeah, I'll add in a sentence to say that both versions were approved.
Okay.
Here it is. There were two versions. I'm just going to say both the logos.
All right, any further discussion on the minutes? All right, we have a motion seconded to approve the minutes. I will go through a roll call vote in alphabetical order by last name. Gary Beller.
Here.
You're saying aye, I think, Gary?
Aye.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah Boyce?
Aye.
Peter Brace is absent at the moment. Graham Durovich?
Abstain.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
Ian Golding is absent at the moment, I believe. Fritz McClure?
Aye.
And chair says aye, so those minutes are approved. All right, great. Jen, did you have a comment?
No, you just skipped me in the roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Would you like to add your aye?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. That's a first for me, I think. All right, next item on the agenda is our introduction to Arcadis. We have Trevor Johnson here representing Arcadis. They were awarded the contract to develop the Coastal Resilience Plan for Nantucket. Trevor, welcome and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everybody for having me here today. We're super excited to meet you all and to get started on this project, which I know is a long time coming and very important to the community on Nantucket. So yeah, my name is Trevor Johnson. I'm a planner by training and have focused in my career on kind of climate adaptation and coastal resilience planning. I'll serve as the project manager for the Coastal Resilience Plan, be working, to manage our kind of multidisciplinary teams and the resources that Arcadis, as well as our sub-consultants, STOS, One Architecture, and the Lisa Craig Group bring to bear. And I know I speak for kind of our entire team when I say we are very excited to start on this project and to be working with the town, the community, and with you all on the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee to undertake this work and deliver the project. So just a little bit more about me. I've been with Arcadis for about 1.5 years, working mostly on projects, resilience projects in New England, but across the country as well. Prior to Arcadis, I worked in local government, both in Massachusetts and New York City. In New York City, I was involved in waterfront and resilience planning in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, focused primarily on kind of land use planning and community engagement. And actually, before kind of launching my career as a planner, I worked in historic preservation, and in fact, my first trip to Nantucket was a site visit to the Museum of African American History out there, in I think 2010 or 2011. So it'll be good to kind of reinvigorate those roots in historic preservation through this project as well. Arcadis, for those of you who aren't familiar, we are a fairly large global design and consulting firm. We're based out of the Netherlands globally. Our headquarters in the United States are in Colorado. We have about 28,000 global employees, but 7,000 of which are based here in the US. And we really span a range of disciplines from engineering, architecture, planning, design, and science. And we do work across the country. I am part of a team that has a kind of specialized focus on water management and resilience planning and design. And this team has been involved in a number of kind of leading national efforts around resilience planning, design, and also implementing and constructing resilience and coastal adaptation projects. Some of the examples of work that you may be familiar with from New England, including our work with the City of Boston since 2015 on citywide and neighborhood level vulnerability assessment and resilience planning. We were the technical lead on Climate Ready Boston, and then also led the process for coastal resilience solutions for South Boston, which was a neighborhood level planning effort. And we also, our team works across the country. So we've been involved in planning, design, and construction projects in Connecticut, a number of projects in New York City, including currently the Seaport and Financial District Coastal Master Plan that's ongoing right now. We work in South Florida, Louisiana, California, Texas, and elsewhere. And I would say, as well as this came up when we were interviewing for the project, but I think we publicize a lot of our larger kind of, more sort of hallmark resilience planning efforts, but we work with communities of all size. So we have, experience working on MVP planning projects for, small communities in Massachusetts, watershed level planning for smaller towns and cities in Connecticut. So we really do work across cross scales and look to kind of marry those, global and national best practices with the unique needs and conditions found in each of the communities we work with. And we'll look to do the same with Nantucket. I mentioned our sub-consultants, Stoss, One Architecture, and Lisa Craig Group. They'll be supporting the project really throughout. We'll be working as an integrated team, but their foci will be on kind of design of the built environment and ecological design, community engagement, and particularly with Lisa Craig, the kind of relationship to historic preservation and the preservation of character, the community's character through our resilience planning efforts. So yeah, that's kind of the elevator pitch on me and Arcadis and our team. I would, happy to answer any questions, but I'd also, love to hear a little bit from each of you. I know we'll be working closely together over the next year or so. So I think it'd be great to, if there's time for it, to have each kind of member of the committee introduce themselves. And I'd be curious to know if you have any thoughts on what success looks like on this project, and what each member believes to be the kind of steps and hallmarks of a successful coastal resilience planning project will be.
Gary, would you like to take a stab at that? Let Trevor know why you're on the committee and
Trevor. I'm the chair of the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers. And as you know, Nantucket is a seasonal community.
Mhm.
There are maybe 10 or 14,000 people year round, but in the summer, that population rises to 40 or 50,000. And we seasonal types who are spending a lot more time than the usual season this year, we account for about 85 to 90% of the revenue that the town runs on our $143 million budget. And so our committee was put together to make sure that the seasonal residents here like us have a voice in government, and we meet with members of the select board from time to time and other government officials to make sure that our views are at least heard and hopefully considered. I happen personally to live in the Brant Point area and in a house that is in the flood zone. And so we're very conscious of the changes, the climate changes and rising tide and storm surges. And we're hopeful that Nantucket will start to take some steps that will ameliorate what we see is already happening at certain times, not as much this summer as last year when we had lots of flooding in our area. I was interested in one of the things that you said was that your firm was involved in a lot of different projects. And when you mentioned one of the early projects, you talked about working with Boston on some coastal resiliency, but you mentioned the year 2015. And I'm thinking about that and say, why? So Boston was starting to think about coastal resiliency issues in 2015 and hired a firm like yours to start working on it. And here we are in Nantucket, where it's a very important issue. And of course, we didn't get started until 2019. So we have a lot of catching up to do. That's my view. Thanks.
Sarah, do you want to go next? And again, I'm just using alphabetical order.
Sure. Hi, Trevor. I'm Sarah Boyce. I am one of the community members at large as part of this committee. In my professional life, I'm an ecologist, and I work as the Director of Research and Education at the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, which is a land trust on the western part of the island. And I think what your question was, like, what do you think success looks like? I was thinking about one thing I really want to make sure we engage with the entire island. We've talked a lot about this with the different types of engagement, that we get all of our community members, not just the vocal members who we kind of know will attend our meetings and things like that. We want to really reach the entire community for everything that entails. And then I also, really want to make sure we don't focus just on the built environment. We include a lot of the natural environment and the positives of that, and encouraging, we're fortunate on Nantucket to have so much open space, and how we can protect it, but also utilize that to help with resiliency measures. And then I would really hope with this process that you guys, your company engages with the expertise in the local community where possible, and really use our local knowledge, because there is a lot of, not everything, but we have a lot of local knowledge on island, and I think that's kind of the best resource in some avenues. So those are my 2 cents or 3 cents.
That's great. That's super helpful.
Thank you, Sarah. Peter, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Trevor, my name is Peter Brace. I, as a lot of people do, represent a different section of the community. I'm a member of the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board. Prior to that, I'd been a reporter for 2 different newspapers covering environmental issues, and have written a couple of books about the natural history of the island. And I also own a business where I do guided natural history hikes on conservation land around the island. And I want to echo some of what Sarah said. It's so important that the people of this island don't view us as just another town committee that's meeting, that's solving a problem, that's going to create a document that's going to sit on the shelf or whatever it's going to do. People really need to be engaged. They really need to know that the ocean is at their doorstep. They need to know that, that, you know, just because they live inland, that this isn't going to affect, that it's going to affect everybody. What else was I going to say? I'm not good in the mornings, so you just kind of have to bear with me. And I just came from the dentist, so my whole right side of my face is sagging down.
Peter, we can come back to you if you like.
No.
Okay.
I had a question for Trevor. I wanted to know if Nantucket was the smallest community that you guys have helped. It sounds like you're all over the world, so we're just this little 47.8 square mile, you know, pile of sand in the island. So can you guys drop down from way up there to come down to Little Nantucket? Can you, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, no, you are not the smallest community we work with. We've just finished a municipal vulnerability preparedness plan for the town of Ayer in Massachusetts, which is 8,000 people year round. So, so yeah, we certainly have the ability to kind of work across scales. You know, even if we're even where we work on, you know, larger, let's say, you know, in Louisiana, we've been supporting the kind of statewide watershed scale flood resilience program that's been developed in the aftermath of some pretty significant flooding that happened there in 2016. And, you know, even when we're working at the statewide level, we're still engaging with and working closely, you know, with communities that are very rural and very small in inland parts of the state. So we are very capable of kind of translating what we learn in a place like Boston or San Francisco or New York City to the, you know, local conditions in communities of all scales and characters.
And I wanted to say one more thing. As you explore the island, as you work your way around and look at our shoreline, you'll see that there are loads of individual erosion abatement projects in front of people's properties, you know, including just sand fence or snow fence, you know, sand-filled coconut fiber coir bags, geotubes, rock walls, bulkheads, even some groins sticking out from people's properties. And these are all individual efforts on individual properties, people saying, I'm afraid the ocean's going to take my house or my property. I want to protect it. They got their permissions. They put up their houses. They put up their protections. But I think it's super, super important that from this process, our population gets the idea that this is a group effort. Even though there's going to be various things that are done along the shoreline that may be different from the next thing, it's all of us working together to do this. Because the individual projects by themselves are great for that person's property, but if the person next door on either side doesn't do anything or isn't focused on doing something, then it doesn't really do anything for the rest of the shoreline that's not helped.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep.
Because people have that mindset, it's my house, I want to protect it, and they're going to do that. Or bunches of people band together, as there are certain projects on the island that have done that. But still, it's just an area. Anyway.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No,
Thank you,
those
Peter.
are great points.
Graham, you would be next.
Thank you. I'm Graham Durovich. I am the Recycling and Solid Waste Coordinator for the town in my day job, I guess you would say. And for this committee, I serve as a community member at large. I guess I would echo a lot of what Sarah said as well. I am really interested that this coastal resiliency plan and the work of our committee keeps in mind kind of the One Health approach of understanding the relationships between human, animal, and environmental health. And how they're interlinked and the impacts long-term, not just what serves us now or in the next 20 years, but really thinking in the long-term beyond that. additionally, just making sure we have stakeholder involvement and buy-in from the larger community, and acknowledging our very diverse community and the invisible voices, so to say, in our community that don't show up or don't feel that they have a voice, but are an integral part of our community and our resilience. So those are kind of my concerns going forward, I guess, and what I hope we can help address through coastal resilience. And I guess I am curious about what your group has done in the past, perhaps from environmental social justice perspective, combined with coastal resilience.
Yeah, I mean, those are good points, and it's certainly, you know, kind of, I think in a lot of ways, coastal resilience can take on this kind of like very technical perspective where it becomes a question of, you know, just engineering, just design, just sort of understanding the science underlying climate change and future flood risk. But you know, most of the projects that we undertake from a planning perspective, we kind of see the engagement as the real backbone of it, and that's part and parcel of our focus on implementation. That, you know, you really can't say that you have an implementable plan unless you've generated sufficient kind of stakeholder engagement and buy-in from all members of the community in that plan throughout the process, and then to be able to carry it forward as champions for the recommendations and the project overall after you know our efforts are complete, right? So this doesn't end 12 months from now when Arcadis delivers a document to this committee and to the town. Really, that's just the beginning. And so for us, you know, we really have to be diligent and thorough in our stakeholder engagement, and that includes, you know, questions of equity and environmental justice, and making sure that, you know, we are talking about resilience in the broadest sense, and that's not just about defending against flood, but also all the interdependent connections that support the vibrancy of the community. So that's certainly at the forefront of our thinking as we will be developing our stakeholder engagement approach. And I think we very much would look to you all to help us understand, you know, what the appropriate strategies will be as we develop that plan, the engagement plan, and then start to undertake that work to make sure that we are reaching deep enough into the community. And we're kind of right in this right now. We're beginning another project for the city of Boston right around the same time, looking at, you know, needing to engage with communities that have been marginalized through a variety of planning processes in the past and have not been part of the conversation as you know, as much as they probably should have been. So that's something we definitely hold as a value and we'll be looking to address as we move forward.
All right, thank you. Matt, would you go ahead?
Hi, Trevor. My name is Matt Fee. I'm a select board representative on this committee. I've been on the island since 60 plus years now. I own a small business. I own a bakery, sandwich shop, and I've moved everything to high ground. So, you know, I hope that we come out of this with a framework that includes, you know, so zoning and land use that we can implement sooner rather than later, so we don't continue to, you know, sort of make things worse in certain areas. And I would like to see us end the polarization that we're in, you know, and sort of build some consensus on what we need to do when and where and how we're going to pay for it. I mean, if we come out with a couple things like that, we will have done, you know, we've done a good thing for the island.
Thank you, Matt. Jen.
Hi, Trevor. Nice to meet you. I'm Jen Carberg. I work with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. I'm their research program supervisor and, you know, broadly a wetland ecologist. And as I work in wetlands more frequently in recent years, I've also then been working on, you know, issues with coastal resiliency and research focused on resiliency of our natural environment. And on this committee, I'm actually on it as a representative of the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. We're a nonprofit land conservation group, and we're the largest landowner on the island, with a lot of coastal properties and inland properties spread around the island. And I would just echo a lot of what some of the other committee members have already said. You know, what I really want to see out of this is the fact that a coastal resiliency plan will focus on the whole island, and understanding that we can do all the work we can to protect the downtown and think about resiliency in our built environment, but that a lot of what makes Nantucket special are our natural resources as well, just from, in one part, from the beauty that they provide the island, but there's a lot of historical value tied to our natural resources. And there's also a lot of ecological value tied to it. We have, you know, some globally rare ecosystems out here in places that are worth maintaining as the value of the island. And also, you know, kind of encouraging that thought and structuring the conversation around the idea that some communities have a place to move inland, and we don't. We're an entirely coastal community. We have no area of the island that's not going to be impacted by these issues, which makes the conversation even more complicated. But seeing a plan that focuses on that whole island, I think, will be of great value to Nantucket.
Fritz, I'm going to go to you, and then I'll finish up after.
Okay. Good morning, Trevor. My name is Fritz McClure. I'm a retired lawyer by profession, and well, not the retired part, but I'm a lawyer by profession who's now retired. I'm a representative of the Town of Nantucket Planning Board, and I just want to reiterate basically what Matt said and what Jen said. We are unique, I think, or at least among, I presume, fairly few areas that, since we represent it, we are an island. We're very low lying, and we have population on all shores. And that, combined with, we have very high land value. So when it comes time to talking about how we don't keep building or developing our land in flood-prone areas or sensitive areas, how we move away from that over a period of time is something that the problem is compounded by those are all very high land values, and private property owners are going to want to protect those land values. And second of all of that is done in the context of, at least on the zoning side, done in the context of changes to the zoning bylaw, which are done through an annual town meeting process, a very democratic, open, some would argue not democratic, but certainly very open process. It can be democratic, certainly subject to a lot of discussion. And so the public interface and support from community, communication with the community is going to be vitally important, because otherwise this is just going to face a lot of opposition. People say we don't want to do that, we don't want to face those problems, or we don't believe we have those problems to the extent you might say we do. And so there might be a tendency to try to ignore it, or at least minimize whatever impact we have. Just one thing, I think from our standpoint, the committee was somewhat surprised, or at least I was, by the vast amount of information that we have by virtue of prior studies. And we spent a great deal of time putting together a library, which is online, of most of all of the, or maybe all of the prior studies. So what I was surprised about, or taken by right away, was that it isn't so much not knowing what's going to happen or where it's going to happen, it's really what we're going to do about it. And although we on the committee may have seen most of those studies now and appreciate what's going to happen, I'm not sure by and large the community really understands what's going to happen in the more severe timeframes. You know, a little bit farther out, when sea level rise really starts, you know, if we get into the higher numbers, really what could happen to this island. And I don't think most people in the community understand that yet. So that's it.
Thank you, Fritz.
Great.
That's actually a great lead-in to what I was going to say. I'm Mary Longacre. I'm the chair and serving as the third community member at large. I have a somewhat of a background in geology, but worked primarily as a business consultant. And my approach is, most importantly, to keep this conversation moving forward, to not let this get put on the back burner, and then to turn that conversation into action so that we actually do something, as Fritz said, with all of this information and planning that we're generating. Echoing what others have said, you know, to make sure that everybody in the community is involved and aware of what's going on. And looking at it from my perspective, I have a long family history on the island. We are going to have to balance, you know, the loss that we're inevitably going to suffer of something. We can't say exactly what, with the cost of protecting it, with the quality of life here. And I think Nantucket is very good at focusing on its history and protecting that, and not so good at looking at its future and figuring out what that's going to look like. So those are my main motivations here. And a question for you, Trevor. You mentioned you'd been to the island before. Can you elaborate a little bit more about your personal experience on Nantucket?
Sure. Well, it is. I will admit that a minimal personal experience on the island. I think that was my only time out there was that day was site visit to the Museum of African American History as part of I think a funding application that they had put forward to a foundation that I was working with at the time. So it was a lovely trip, I will say, but I am looking forward to hopefully, you know, public health guidance permitting, you know, coming out to the island, you know, during the course of this project. Vince and Jeff and my team have already been kind of having some preliminary discussions about what a site visit might look like early in the fall here. So looking forward to getting back out there and you know, getting started on this project, and definitely appreciate everybody's perspectives here. I think, you know, it's just really helpful to kind of level set a little bit and understand the perspectives of where this committee is coming from, given its importance to the process. And I would just say, you know, I think Gary and others touched on, I don't think Nantucket is as far behind the 8 ball as maybe you feel like you are. And I say that because many communities that begin the sort of resilience planning process only do so after they've had a very extreme, significant event that kind of catalyzes the, you know, public will and funding from a variety of governmental sources to actually generate that momentum. And I think for communities like Nantucket, you've really done a lot with very little. You know, and you have generated some momentum kind of in a proactive way. So obviously there's a lot of work still to be done, but, you know, I think that the library of studies that you guys have already undertaken is a tremendous like resource that we will, you know, build on and not look to duplicate or reinvent the wheel, but actually, you know, use all that as a resource to kind of, you know, multiply the effort and cover a lot of ground, I think, in the next year.
I would say that being an island, we're used to significant weather events, and they're sort of normal for us, and so they don't produce that instant, you know, reaction. But thank you, Trevor, very much for coming here and for allowing us all to introduce ourselves. Vince, I'm going to ask you, have you heard from Mary Bergman about joining us later this morning? Can you reach out to her while Rachel is talking?
So yes, that was part of my plan. Both Holly Backus and Mary Bergman are both in a HDC meeting, I think, and I've already keyed up the email and text message to let them both know, so that once Rachel comes close to the end, and I think we then have there's potential discussion about Acclimate.
Right.
Once that was going to start, I was just going to let them know. That was the plan.
Okay, great, thank you. So Trevor, are you able to hang around for the balance of the meeting?
I will hang around for the next 25 minutes or so. Unfortunately, I do have another conflict
Okay.
at 11 a.m.
Okay.
But yeah, look forward to listening in for the rest for the time that I can here.
All right, then with apologies to the public, I am not going to ask for public comment for Trevor's portion, but we will go straight into Rachel's. Vince,
Sorry.
do you have a point?
Yeah, Jen wanted to speak up.
Oh, please. Thank you, Jen. Sorry, that's twice for me. Third
No
time and I'm out.
I was just raising my hand. You couldn't have seen me. Thank you, Mary. Through you, Trevor, I just wanted to ask, just kind of quickly, is there anything right now that the committee can do? We're kind of meeting bi-weekly. Is there anything in the next 2 weeks or the next month that we can do that can help move things along? Or where is our first interaction or the work that we need to start doing with you? Where do we kind of sit past this initial introduction? And maybe some of that comes from Vince as well, but.
Yeah. Vince, did you want to say anything? It looked like you were
sure.
about to.
Yes. So we haven't finalized a date yet, Jen, but hopefully speaking within the next, I think, roughly month, sometime in the middle of October, is going to be the first planned site visit for Arcadis and partners to Nantucket. Once we actually have a date locked in for that, and we understand how much time they'll have, because as I understand, the first visit is just going to be a day visit, catch a glimpse of the island. If we can build in time to speak to partners like NCF, great. The big thing for that date is for them to see the lay of the land.
I missed being out there yesterday. But...
And the other thing I would add is, I think you guys, this committee, can fill a role as kind of ambassadors of the plan to the community. So, you are, for lack of a better term, kind of eyes and ears on the ground and kind of a steering committee for us. And so, the more you can be kind of spreading the word that this plan is taking place, making sure that there is broad-based kind of awareness that it's happening from the get-go, starting now. I think it will benefit our engagement process when we start to go out to the community with kind of dedicated engagement efforts. And I think, even without COVID, we would be thinking about kind of in-person and virtual engagement, just because of the kind of widely dispersed population, both on and off the island. So I think just kind of thinking about how we can best leverage the tools that we have to make sure that we are reaching all constituents on the community, on the island, on and off the island would be a benefit to us.
Trevor, I'll make a suggestion. I don't know how your visit is going to be arranged, but if you do a fly-in to get the aerial view of the island, I think that will really help you understand the lay of the land. Because the way that our island is arranged, there's large parts of it that most people don't see because there aren't roads going through those areas. But a nice aerial view would be a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah.
All right, can we move to Rachel Freeman from the Land Bank? Good morning and welcome, Rachel.
Morning. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
We're glad you're here.
Happy to be here. I'm going to take 2 seconds to introduce myself. I know a lot of you, but I think today's presentation, to the best of my understanding from my conversation with Vince, is meant to explain a little bit more and a little bit more in depth about the land bank itself and how we are relating to coastal resiliency and what we're doing in-house. And just to start with me, I'm the environmental coordinator for the land bank, and I've been doing this now for 6, almost 7 years. And my job is fascinating to me and interesting because I come from more of a scientific research background, ecology based. And now I am in a role where what I'm trying to do, at least from my perspective, is within the context of project management, make the best environmental and public benefit choices we can. And so I'm involved in a lot of environmental permitting and I'm involved in a lot of project planning, and I'm also involved in just conservation management. But it's fascinating to try and benefit the public while at the same time benefiting the environment and sort of meeting everyone's needs at the same time to me. So that's just a little bit about me. And starting with the land bank, if I can steal the screen, do I get that option, Vince? Okay, I have a presentation that I put together. Let's see if this actually works. And
looks good.
Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. And it was partially put together by me, and I have to give Taylor and Guthrie credit, who work with me and do an absolute fabulous job. And this is actually a large component of this presentation was put together by them and presented to the Land Bank Commission probably about a month or 6 weeks ago, because the Land Bank Commission is actively interested in learning more about coastal resiliency, and so they can factor those concepts into some of their decision making when it comes to projects and acquisition. So just to start with a little bit of history about the Land Bank. The Land Bank was initiated by the Planning Board, so the idea was put together actually by the Nantucket Planning Board, and then it was brought to town meeting. It was a practically unanimous vote in 1983 that then went to the state legislature, where it was officially approved and the Land Bank Act was actually created. Basically, the funding for the Land Bank, as many of you probably know, is based on a 2% transfer tax on almost all real estate transfers on Nantucket. And the Land Bank Act governs what we do with those funds, which specifically says that it is, for acquiring, holding, and managing land relating to conservation, recreation, and agriculture. Recreation gets a little confusing for some people, but what it really means for us is outdoor recreation. There was a specific golf act that was actually written into the Land Bank Act as a subset. So golf is a little bit different in that we own 2 golf courses, and those have indoor facilities associated with them. But basically, it's for conservation land, agricultural land, and outdoor recreation. The Land Bank is a little bit confusing, and it's funny because I actually went downstairs and talked to Jesse Bell, who's the Assistant Executive Director of the Land Bank this morning, about how to explain our relationship with the town. And it's difficult for me to wrap my head around, but what's important to know is that we're entirely independent from the town. We're governed by a 5-member elected commission. So those are the Land Bank commissioners, and they're publicly elected officials, and they have a term of 5 years each. And while this is true that we're entirely independent from the town and that we're governed by the Land Bank Commission, and if you were to appeal the Land Bank Commissioner's decision or the Land Bank Commission's decision, it would not revert to the select board. So there's no interconnection politically there. We're autonomous, but we do have some places that we overlap in administrative functions. And I think the major one that always comes up is that our holdings and our debt would always revert back to the town if for some reason the land bank ceased to exist. So in that way, we're definitively tied to the town. We are considered municipal for zoning purposes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're truly municipal. I guess what I always come back to is I don't have necessarily a word to describe what we are, but I guess from my perspective, the important components are what I just covered, that we're independent from the town, were municipal for zoning purposes, and that if the land bank ceased to exist, we would, all of our property and debt would revert to the town. Another very important component of the land bank is that one of our major bodies that oversees us is the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And they basically require approval for any project that we do through Section 6. And so they ultimately have say over what we're doing and not doing. And so we have a lot of communication with them, and we provide reports every year about what we have been doing and how we're spending our money, and they're our ultimate oversight, I would say. And then another really important feature of the land bank is Article 97. So a lot of people think, why can't we just sort of do whatever we want? And it's actually a huge deal to have a change of use or disposal of land bank property. And change of use is defined really clearly in our act, and it's pretty restrictive, actually. So, what we need to actually have a change of use or any sort of disposal of land is a 2/3 vote of the state legislature. So it has to go all the way up. It has to go through town meeting, it has to go through the state legislature, and we have to accomplish that 2/3 vote. This is important because it really affects our capacity to do different things on our property. And there is some gray area here in terms of this definition. I was having a discussion just the other day with Sam, I'm going to mispronounce his name, but Keverstan from Mass Audubon, and we were talking about the beach modules and, Smith Point, and whether or not it would be considered disposal of land if erosion was happening based on beach modules that were placed further down the beach. Would that be considered erosion of land bank, disposal of land bank property, and thereby in order to put beach modules in, would we have to have a 2/3 vote of the state legislature? So it can get very murky, I guess, is the answer. So there's not always a clear-cut answer, and often we have to go to the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs if things get gray and it's unclear to us, because they are the ones who ultimately will say, yes, Article 97 applies here, or no, Article 97 does not apply in this instance. So they're the major governing body for us, I would think. Now that I've given you just a little bit of idea about the land bank, I wanted to tell you some things that we are thinking about here and how we're thinking about coastal resiliency. I think the take home for me is, in a weird way, I feel like we're a little late to the table and that we haven't joined up with every coastal resiliency group or board or discussion that's going on the island. So as the environmental coordinator, I feel like, to be quite honest, I feel like we're a little behind, but at the same time, what I realize is that the land bank, as you just saw, the land bank, nowhere in any of those discussions did it say that we're a scientific research organization. And that's pretty strong ethic through the land bank. We rely heavily on the Conservation Foundation and Linda Loring and other places that are doing research to use their work and use their findings to then implement them on our property. But I think what I was thinking about is that we're not in the forefront of the research area for resiliency discussions. What we are doing is we're living it every single day. We are living adaptation, we're living management. Even if we're not using that term every 5 minutes, every decision that we're making on our properties these days has to do with rising sea levels and flooding, increased flooding, and environmental impacts. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of about 5 slides from the presentation that was just given to the Land Bank Commission about a month ago to sort of highlight these issues for us.
Rachel, if I can break in for a moment.
Yeah,
those 3 pictures are not Nantucket pictures, correct?
Not Nantucket pictures.
Okay, just for Trevor's benefit, yeah.
Yes, Trevor, these 3 pictures are not Nantucket pictures. But these are things that, you know, well, no, they can't all be done on Nantucket. This is like, you know, versions of adaptation is basically what Taylor and Guthrie were trying to highlight. So these are ways that different communities are adapting, everything from a, you know, more minimalistic approach, like a rain garden, to, you know, a bit of a living shoreline and a bit of a, you know, stone blockade, to then the hardcore dike, you know, that you see all the way on the right. So one of the ways that we feel like the Land Bank can contribute to coastal resiliency efforts on the island is through adaptation. We have a lot of property, and, you know, it's whether or not we want to be using our management strategies in ways that would benefit coastal resiliency adaptation, I suppose.
Excuse me again, Rachel, for breaking in again. For Trevor's benefit, how much land does the Land Bank own on the island, either in acreage or percentage terms?
We have about 3,500 acres, which again is less than half of what the Conservation Foundation owns. So it's small numbers wise. I think the thing that is different about the Land Bank is because we are receiving that 2% transfer tax on real estate transfers on the island, we're able to keep up with the pace of inflation, and we're able to still be purchasing property. So we are still actively purchasing property all the time, I guess, is the right answer. We have new properties coming online, you know, many a year. So a lot of them are small properties, not necessarily large holdings. So that's why it's 3,500 acres, but it's important, I think, when you think about coastal resiliency and potential to purchase properties, which may be important in that regard. Okay, so adaptation is one of the things that the Land Bank, I guess, is thinking about. And again, starting to really implement in our management efforts. This is Nantucket. So the Landscaping with Native Plants on Nantucket is a brochure that, you know, we are bringing forth because we recognize that native plants are easily adaptable to many of these habitats. You know, they do well with flooding a lot of times. You can just choose wisely, and then you have fewer issues. You know, you can have permeable pavement, or you can just raise your house. It's another way to go about it. So these are actually Nantucket pictures, Trevor. This is Washington Street with the beach grass. We planted new beach grass there and had removed a house from this site a number of years ago. And so it was restored basically to a beach habitat. The Land Bank also owns the parcel that's actually behind the brown car on the other side, where there was also houses removed, and we'll be installing a park over the course of the next year. These are directly on Washington Street, which is an area that's going to probably come up in discussions, and is something that's right on the edge of the harbor. This is also a project that Vince is probably intimately familiar with, more so than me, but we had a major washout and flooding of the Pulpus Road corridor. So they've been working to harden this edge, and then to place artificial oyster reef, and to try and decrease wave action so that maybe we don't lose the road again. And Vince could probably tell you more about that than I can right now, but it's just another example of ongoing projects on the island where we are actually working to adapt to some of the climate and coastal issues we're having. The other way to go about it, right, is to mitigate and basically prevent greenhouse gases. Again, this was raised to the commission. the land bank doesn't really do a lot of solar or wind type projects. Again, that's come up as a big Article 97 issue. So it's not necessarily in our mission to provide land for people to do solar projects, and we continually are being asked for things like that. But at this point, it's been determined that that could present as an Article 97 issue where it would actually be a change of use. And so that's not something that's going to be possible for us right now. But again, by holding open space, and maybe that is the best way that right now we can, work to mitigate any sort of climate changes that are happening. Whoops, wrong way. So the other thing that Taylor and Guthrie did was they put together our vulnerable areas. So for the land bank, they did a map basically showing the FEMA National Flood Layer and the flood zone designations. And this was really helpful, I think, for the commissioners, because this is the overall map of Nantucket with the chance of flooding based on FEMA information. And then they pulled out all of the land bank's properties and basically looked at the high-risk coastal areas, and then properties that had a 1% annual chance of flooding. And as you can see, we have a large number of properties that are in purple. A lot of them are really small, but they're all around the edges. And then there's a huge number of properties that are within that 100-year flood zone. So most of the island is. So that's, something for us to be considering, but I think it was important for our commissioners to see the properties that we would consider high risk at this point. This is that Washington Street corridor that I was just discussing. And this is the downtown area and the land bank holdings in downtown. We highlighted this because from when you get into the public benefit component of coastal resiliency, people, and I know there was a lot of discussion about this before, but often people automatically flip to the built environment. So when you look at downtown and you see the potential for flooding downtown, that's something that just sort of shocks people, and it has value in getting people's attention. So we highlighted this area for the land bank commissioners. And this is the Washington Street site, and this is the property actually right here that we were just looking at. And I know it sounds like, based on what Vince has told me, Washington Street has come up a number of times at the CRAC meetings. I know it's come up for Acclimate, and some of the work that the Preservation Institute has done as potential area for adaptation projects. So I think the land bank remains open-minded to those. Again, it would have to be something that was approved by the Land Bank Commission. And so it's just good to be aware of kind of how the structure works, so that any interest in having projects performed or anything like that kind of takes the right, goes through the right channels, so that it has a higher likelihood of getting the interest that it needs. Let's see, I guess one thing I would say about these properties here is that we actually have projects going on basically all of them. So Lily Pond, we are working with Horsley Witten to do a restoration project. And there's a coastal resiliency component to that, in that, we're looking at how can this area retain floodwaters. Easy Street is one. I'll show you kind of a picture in the moment that I think Mary Longacre put it nicely, in that we are actually used to significant weather events. So the Easy Street project that we're doing is an area that floods radically some winters and not other winters, but it's, when I show you the picture, it's a significant weather event, but I think we're used to these. And whether, you know, we've thought long and hard about the project as it is, but there's going to be a bit of a learning curve and there's going to be adaptation in that project. Similarly, on Washington Street, like I said, we're working in this area here to do a small park. You know, whether or not, as of right now, it's not necessarily slated to have any sort of flood retention component to it, but I could see that being something that we do going forward. The Consu Springs area, we're doing a really large scale marsh restoration. And I've thought a lot about how that will impact flooding. And then we also have a project going on over in here where there's a public park going to be created in there. So there's just a ton of work going on in some of these areas. So, you know, what we said to basically the commissioners was, how do the fact that all of these properties are within high risk coastal flood zones impact the land bank, you know, and the question is, does it impact our property acquisition decisions? You know, should it be affecting how we manage our existing properties and what kind of projects we undertake? So this is kind of what we posed to the commissioners and said, you know, those are kind of the three questions that we're going to be looking for them to assess basically every time they're looking at an acquisition or every time we're looking at a project. You know, is how does coastal resiliency factor in here? And does it? So this is that Easy Street project that I was telling you about. And I just pulled out two quick projects or one and a half actually, to show you some of the coastal resiliency issues we deal with. This house is now gone and this entire area is going to become a park. But you know, this is the level of flooding that we see in Nantucket sometimes. And the park that is going to happen there is going to look like this. Right now, the wood boardwalks are already installed, but the plantings are not, and neither is the brick walkway. This project is really interesting to me because it's going to have 4 feet of water on top of it at some point, probably. And, you know, there are going to be things that survive and going to be things that don't. We've tried to make the wisest choices. We have made it so that we do not expect the boardwalk or the brick sidewalk to go anywhere, no matter how much water is there. You know, there's always questions about, are we trying to stop water from coming in, or are we trying to stop water from leaving through our property, or neither? Are we just trying to accept that there will be water? So this is the type of thing where you've got a public park, and we know it's going to be inundated. So that's just one example of like decision making that we face here. The other thing I just wanted to show you quickly is if it comes up, and I thought this was just kind of a neat video. Oh no, I don't want to do that. This is basically the South Shore, and the South Shore of Nantucket, the land bank owns in this area, this is smooth hummocks, and the land bank owns a huge number of these beaches. And it doesn't actually add up to too much acreage again, but in the whole, in terms of beachfront, but in terms of the smooth hummocks area, we have, you know, right around 500 acres of property. And you can see there's obviously ongoing erosion issues. We're constantly dealing with, do we move this parking lot? Do we not? How do we change that path? You know, for Beach Act to promote public beach access? Are we going to lose this road or not? You know, what is our backup plan if we're going to lose this road? This is an area where we basically are sort of accepting that as erosion happens, we'll just be backing up as we go. We worry more about the extremely used parking areas. While all of this is hugely used in the summertime, during the off season and in the summertime, probably the most popular beach is Cisco, and the land bank owns the Cisco parking lot and beach. And, you know, it's a parking lot that's filled with hundreds of cars every single day. And so we have a plan to move it, and we have a time when we know we're going to move it. There's a road associated with it that complicates it. And so, you know, there's all these components that are being discussed, and it's every property is different, but I think the thing that we could say is that literally every project we're doing almost has a coastal resiliency component to it. It's so frequent. It's a part of our daily discussions. And I think that's what I wanted to let everyone know. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say.
Rachel,
I hope that was helpful.
Yes, I think that is excellent. Could we get a copy of that presentation that we can put on our website for people to reference? That would be helpful.
Definitely. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I had seen a little bit on the plans that were made available for the Easy Street Park, and I wanted to follow up. I think that there was going to be a component that showed the flood level from various storm events. Is that still planned? Okay. And do you think that you can add information about potential sea level rise scenarios to that marker?
You know, we have talked about that. That's a definite possibility. Again, I'd have to bring it to the commission. But if that's something that's of interest to, you know, the CRAC committee, I think there's an opportunity for that kind of education to happen.
Great. Okay, other questions for Rachel from the committee members? Or Trevor, if you're still here, I'd be happy to have you take the floor for a moment if you have questions.
No immediate questions, but definitely a informative presentation. I would love to get a copy of it if possible, as well as any, I mean, I think we'll work with Vince on this, but any underlying studies or work that was done, I think would just be really valuable inputs to our process as we get off the ground.
Sure. Just so you know, this is the Cisco Beach parking lot that I was just describing, where, you know, we have plans and we're just sort of watching to see what happens.
Okay, I don't see any hands from the committee members. I will ask the public if they have questions for Rachel on the land bank's presentation.
Mary,
Sarah, yes. Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Rachel, for kind of updating us. It's, you know, I know that we could attend I think the Land Bank Commission meetings are public. Is that correct? So we could keep up to date with them. So sorry, I haven't. But it's, the one thing I was going to say is, you know, if there were, you know, the educational signs like the Easy Street Project or anywhere else that you wanted help, we do have an education subcommittee. And so just putting it out there that because a lot of these, you know, all these properties are open to the public, if you wanted any assistance or anything, I think I could maybe volunteer the education subcommittee. I'll probably get reprimanded because I don't know how town committees work all the time. But I think that's something where, you know, the CRAC committee could like work with the land bank for some of those types of things.
That would be great. That would be really helpful.
Because I think that the one thing is, as we continue to educate the community, both through CRAC or through Acclimate or through like the work that Trevor's group is going to be doing with the plan, if we're consistent with some of the messaging, because there are so many different scenarios and there's uncertainty and people, you know, if we're as a community kind of consistent with what we discuss as part of the education, it's just helpful for more people to know and hopefully understand.
Yes, and Rachel,
Definitely.
if you're able to stay on a little bit longer, we are going to be discussing the distribution of the recently adopted policy on sea level rise. And we want to make sure that you have that information. So you're welcome to stay.
That would be great. Thank you.
Anything else for Rachel regarding the land bank? Okay, not seeing any hands. And Trevor, if you are willing to stay on another minute or two, we did have a question from the public. Vince, are you able to present that? Again, I know that we are short on time for everybody. So if we can just do a quick Q&A on that.
Sure. So I'm just going to read the content of the email from Deanne Atherton, if that's all right. And I received this at 10:43 after Trevor had already finished speaking, just for everyone's reference. 2 questions, please. One of the members of the who are the members of the Arcadis project team, brackets, as well as their affiliations, close brackets, for Nantucket in addition to Trevor? 2, is there a timeline for the project with monthly targets? So just so that everyone is aware, I'm trying to get this proposal document made public, as is Nantucket Coastal Conservancy, and then at that point that'll be public information, which is fine. But if Trevor wants to give a quick overview, that's okay. The second question about a timeline, we're working with Arcadis and the other partners to develop a monthly time frame of sorts and goals along the way. That is not complete yet, so we don't have it. So unfortunately, it's not available yet. We haven't done it. We're in the process.
So I think the best response to both of those questions might be to finish that documentation, and if Arcadis can provide short biographies of the people who will be involved in the project, and we can post all of that on the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee's webpage through the town, so it's available to everyone in the public. That seems like the best response that we can offer.
Yep.
Okay. All right, moving on. We have an item. We have Kim Rose representing Acclimate with us. Kim had been at our last meeting when we jointly, between Acclimate and this committee, petitioned the Select Board to proclaim September as Coastal Resilience or Climate Change Awareness Month, which they did do. And that led to the idea of listing the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee on Acclimate's website as a partner with our logo. I didn't see a problem with that, but I wanted to make sure that the committee was aware and had a chance to weigh in before we said yes. We have effectively already become a partner with that joint resolution. And if we have questions for Kim about what other responsibilities or requirements might go along with that or expectations, I wanted to give the entire committee a chance to ask. Okay, if there are no questions, then can I get a motion to approve being listed as a partner with Acclimate on their website and displaying our logo? Yes, Jen.
Mary, first, I do have a question first,
yeah.
Sorry. If we as a committee, I guess I haven't necessarily heard of a committee being a partner organization and something like that. So I would just want to make sure that that is something we're able to do as a committee. And then if we are a partner organization, does that mean that we are going to nominate a representative to attend the Acclimate meetings and represent us as the CRAC committee at their meetings?
That's a great question. I'll note that the town itself is already listed as a partner and the town's logo appears on the website. Kim, do you have comments on that?
No, I don't really. Of course, Sarah and Jen, y'all already sit on the Acclimate committee, and Vince has attended meetings in the past as well, and that's kind of how that communication has passed through and everything. So if you want to choose representative, you're more than welcome to. I welcome anybody at the Acclimate meetings, of course. It is a little bit informal compared to a town committee meeting, but of course, like listing you on our website is just so that we can direct people there and everything. Other than that, there's not really any more. I'm not going to tell like, oh, hey, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee should totally do this project all by itself. That's no. I support whatever the committee wants to do. And that's kind of my position is I'm not sticking my hand into your business. I'm just helping support everything. But yeah, that's basically what I have.
Okay, does anyone want to make a motion? Fritz, you're on mute.
Got me? No?
Yep.
Okay. So I would make a motion that I'm trying to figure the right words, that the committee approve being listed as a partner on the Acclimate website.
I'll second.
And I don't know whether we want to then designate a member to attend. That's up to you whether we want to go that far.
But let's do the vote on the motion, and then we can talk about representation.
Okay, so I'll just stop it as approved being listed as a partner on the Acclimate website.
So thank you, and Sarah seconded. I do not see Gary on his screen, so I am going to skip him unless he comes back to the meeting. So Sarah, vote on the motion.
Approve.
Peter?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Thank you. Jen?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So we had Gary absent on that vote. Do we want a representative? Jen and Sarah are not representing the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee when they are attending Acclimate meetings. So do we want a representative for the committee? I'm happy to volunteer for that. I'd love more information, so.
All right, I nominate Mary.
Seconded.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, so quick vote again. Sarah?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. So Kim, if you'll keep me informed about when and where to attend, I appreciate that. And thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the Climate Change Awareness Month. First, a follow-up on the distribution of the recommended sea level rise policy. I believe Vince sent out the email showing that Libby has distributed that policy to a number of departments and committee chairs. In addition to that, we have our stakeholder list, and I would more or less forward that email verbatim. We might want to create a cover letter to the cover letter to the policy. But I think that we want to continue to distribute that policy. And forgive me, I don't remember who said it, but being consistent with the sea level rise scenarios that people are using is going to be very important for the public to understand what people are proposing. I did hear at one of the events last week that apparently it's the state's standard to use the high scenario from NOAA. It's not something I was aware of, but it's also very reassuring to know that we are recommending what the state is recommending and they are recommending what we're recommending. Maybe Holly can provide more information on that, or Vince, if you're aware of that. I just happened to hear that from one of the presenters at one of last week's events. Yeah, okay, yeah, Fritz?
I just had a question. I looked briefly at what was circulated and, or maybe proposed being circulated, and it appeared as if it was just the recommendation without the attached material, the supporting material. I think the supporting material was referenced in a site reference, but if that's the case, I just want to make, my only comment would be, if that's the case, my feeling is it would have been better if the whole thing, so that you actually get that table so that people are really looking at it as opposed to reading a recommendation and then maybe not bothering to look to see what that table really says. So I guess it's a question. Yeah, I guess it's a question and then a comment depending on the answer.
I'm going to look it up. Well,
Mary,
yes, Vince, yes.
So I drafted a version of a cover letter. Libby edited it, and it was the cover letter plus the 2-page recommendation that was below it. That's what went out. And I'm trying to also look up what I forwarded to the committee, and from memory, it was 3 pages, cover letter plus the recommendation with supporting information.
Okay.
Mary, if I may.
Yes, please, Graham.
Just from my position in the DPW, I know that it got forwarded to everyone in the DPW, and the facilities department was looking specifically at the high and actually looking forward to like jumping forward and going through their current building plans.
That's awesome.
So they definitely saw it and read it and are engaged.
Okay, good. I'm wrong.
That is the most wonderful news I could ever hear. All right, yeah, I didn't open the attachment thinking that I was so familiar with it that why would I need to open it? So I'm glad to hear that that's out there. And certainly we would forward as much information as possible if we're sending it. Vince.
I got it on screen and can share if everyone wants to see it. Okay. So pardon me now, 1 second. This is it.
Sorry for the false alarm.
No, you're fine. It's not everything shows up sometimes. So this is, I just went and found the correct attachment, downloaded it. This is the text that Libby approved, and eventually Libby herself sent out to all town department heads as well as committees, decision-making committees. So that's page 1. Then the recommendation and supporting information that we're all very familiar with. It kind of goes on to a 4th page by accident, but that's, you know, we have the point.
That's not how she sent it, though. So it's not coming up. My email's frozen, but we can triple check. Thank you for looking at that, Vince.
No worries.
Yeah. Okay. So the stakeholders list itself, Vince sent out a copy. We can continue to add to it. When I sent out the proclamation of Climate Change Awareness Month, I developed sort of a list of media contacts, which we can add here. Vince, just looking at the list that you sent, I think I can find almost all of the email addresses that we didn't have on there. But of course, if anybody has firsthand knowledge of the best person to contact in each organization, please let Vince know. And if anybody has additions to the stakeholders list, probably just quickest to send them to Vince. And Holly, I see your hand up. You're on mute.
Yes, thank you. I just was curious if there was a list of surveyors and engineers on that list.
I started to talk to Vince about architects, and then he added engineers. And so the question is, what's the best way to reach individuals or individual companies as opposed to organizations? I think we focused more on organizations that would then distribute the information to their membership. And the answer is, I don't know the answer. Maybe the Builders Association, but Holly, do you have a list that we should be using? I guess is the right question.
I don't have a list for surveyors or engineers, and I mentioned them because you know, surveyors do elevation certificates, so you know that's definitely something that's going to have to come into play. I do have you know, I utilize the Realtors Association as a disseminary of information. They were on our list for Resilient Nantucket and the hazard mitigation update. But I would definitely recommend one way or another having a list. Unfortunately, I don't have just by memory of all the different surveying firms that are on Nantucket, that's all I can go by. I don't really have a repository of that, if you will.
Yeah. Fritz?
I could help with that. I mean, I don't think I can help. I mean, just because I may have more time or whatever, but certainly Holly is aware. And I'm aware, from the planning board's point, practice, there are probably 5 or 6 engineers, that surveyors that regularly appear. I'm sure that doesn't exhaust every single one, but I could certainly put together a list of names and addresses and probably telephone numbers from the telephone book. But I can certainly tell you who regularly appears before the planning board. And that would probably cover, Holly, what do you think? 80, 90% of the applications that the planning board would see. So I'd be happy.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, Fritz.
Yeah. So why don't I do that? And Holly, I'll copy you on what I send so you can see what it is. Yeah.
Thank you, Fritz.
Yep.
Any other comments on the stakeholders list? How we'd use it? Yes, Vince, you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just make an appeal that if everyone did have a read of it, if anyone notices that an email address is incorrect, I'd happily take an update as well.
Yeah, I have some updates for you. I'll email you. In particular, what was it? The Mattocket Residents Association and Mattocket Conservation Association, I believe those have merged into one association. But I can get you more information on all of the Civic Leagues associations. I was voted in onto their executive committee at their recent meeting, so I should have access to that.
Excellent, and congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything further on stakeholders? So the idea being that we'll get as many updates as we can to that list, and I think we can just ask Vince to forward the information that Libby sent to anybody that we want to have that information. And we may follow up, at another point with a letter, maybe talking about the Coastal Resilience Plan or other things. I'm just kind of thinking it's time for us to have regular communications out to the public. Holly, did you have a comment there?
I just want to mention that the stakeholder list obviously is going to be imperative with this planning process for the Coastal Resiliency Plan.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, going to the event announcement. So I mentioned we had several climate change related events last week. We had the Rescuing History put on by the Nantucket Preservation Trust with Mary Bergman in charge of that. Mary, can you give us a recap on how that event went and anything, in summary that you'd want to present to the committee members? We never hit a quorum there. We had 4, so fortunately I didn't get us in any trouble.
Yes. It went well. We had about 130 people registered for both days, which I think is pretty good for a conference about sea level rise, and an online conference. We had 11 speakers over the course of the 2 days. We video recorded everything. Rita, who works at the Preservation Trust, is going through and editing some of the videos now, taking out, errors. Times where there was technological errors and things like that. So those will all be emailed out to our listserv, or rather our membership, which is about 1,200 people in the mailing list, sometime in the middle of this week or later this week. I think it was really productive conversation. If the presenters, you never really know what people are going to say until they present, and what directions they're going to go into. And I think it was really valuable for the town of Nantucket and residents of this island to be able to look at places that aren't Nantucket. I think, for instance, Elise Leduc at the Woods Hole Group presented on surf. And I think it was in Falmouth. easier to kind of digest some of the recommendations for another municipality than it would be when you're thinking about your own place and your own home. Because these are very emotional topics when we're talking about, or what are we going to do to the built and natural environment? What happens if Code 2 is breached? What happens if we have to move a house up or back? But with a little bit of separation from these outside experts, I think I was really impressed and pleased with the conversation that was going on. And I think it was interesting just to learn that it's going to be a combination of adaptation strategies, mitigation strategies, and that a decision that we make today isn't necessarily going to be the decision that we're going to stick with for the next 50 years. So I think it was well received. There were a lot of people who really needed to hear some of those messages. I did have some people say that they were, a little depressed, people who don't think about sea level rise all day long, like those of us on this call do. So, and I'm very grateful for Holly and Vince for presenting as well. I think that they really, showed, and Chuck, that Nantucket is a town that's doing a lot and is going to be looked to by a lot of other coastal communities. So when I think about just the progress that's been made in the last year and the hiring of these two people and starting this committee, it's pretty great.
I thought Chuck's presentation on the Easy Street bulkhead was very clear, and I hope that when that's available that we get a chance to distribute that. I think Nantucketers need to see that.
Yeah, I'm going to offer all of it to the TV station once it's all edited. Yeah, I hope that this will build that public consensus or public support for the town is going to have to obviously make some pretty difficult decisions in terms of allowing building in floodplains going forward, and what are they going to do to the public infrastructure too. So.
The other one that you mentioned, Elise Leduc, who from the Woods Hole Group, who presented about Surf Drive in Falmouth, that plan that she talked about is available on the Falmouth website, and I highly recommend taking a look at it. I just thought it was really well done. It was well presented. I was impressed.
I hope that the town of Nantucket too, we're kind of introducing them to some of these leaders, just over in Woods Hole, Falmouth, Mashpee area, who could be hired to do similar studies for the island as well. I think that Surf Drive study will be particularly interesting to watch. How does the public react to that? And how does the town of Falmouth deal with those public concerns? Because that was the first time that those homeowners, I actually think our comments heard that presentation before the homeowners presentation. So that will be one to watch, and to see what lessons can Nantucket learn from interacting with homeowners and the public.
Yeah, her presentation through NPT was Wednesday, and her presentation to the Falmouth Coastal Resilience Action Committee was Thursday, and I watched it because she went into more depth on it. And that committee is going to be discussing it this afternoon, which I plan to attend because it is fascinating to see something roll out. They're ahead of where we are in that one small location, but it really helps to have a vision of what somebody else has done that we haven't gotten to yet.
Right.
Anything else you wanted to say about the symposium? Well, thank you for putting it on and for coming here and giving us an update, and we look forward to the videos so that we can let people know to see them.
Absolutely.
And then Holly, as part of the MVP grant funded Resilient Nantucket, had the first community forum. Very different approach. Holly, you want to tell us about that?
Yes, thank you, Mary. So we had our first two community forums. Basically, it was the first community forum, but broken into two different sections. So that way we could grab people during the day and then grab people at night. But it was hosted by our consultant, Lisa Craig, who is also on the Arcadis team, which I'm very, very happy for. We have that preservation world being wrapped up into both initiatives. But it was basically providing a toolkit to everyone on what to do for preparing for a disaster. And we also had Sarah White from the Massachusetts Emergency Management for the state, and I will tell you, she is the one that I communicated with regularly, especially at the end of the update to the hazard mitigation plan. She is the person in the state for that. And then we also had Shannon Holst from Barnstable County. She's a certified floodplain manager and works very closely with actually a preservation planner from the Cape Cod Commission. I can forget what that acronym is. I apologize. But they, are dealing with the same aspect we are, and are very, very encouraged on the efforts that we with Nantucket have been doing with the built environment, and how do we handle our historic resources. I think it was a great night. We also had a gentleman from Rogers and Gray Insurance, Joe Flood Rossi, who's been pretty much in the world of flooding for the last, I guess, I don't even know, a long time. Well known. That's why they call him Joe Flood. But I thought it was very, very informative to understand, how many we are in the National Floodplain program, NFIP program. About, I think, 1,000 people have policies with that National Flood Insurance Program. But I think it's also important to realize, and it really was very informative, the fact that, they are not in it to make money. They're there to help at the end of the day. And, one thing that I've learned from my first watching and listening Lisa Craig over 4 years ago was that, getting our historical cultural resources within our hazard plan was first and foremost, but also having flood insurance, even if you think you're not in a flood area. I thought that was very informative. So all this information and both the videos and the PowerPoint presentation will be on the town's website under the Resilient Nantucket. All you have to do is actually just Google Resilient AC, and it will take you to our community page, which is also where the Coastal Resiliency Committee page is. So it's all linked together. But this information is going to be available. And again, this is part of the toolkit. And this is just step one. And then also, we'll be having it a little more clear on our processes to continue the Resilient AC. The next phase will be having a planning charrette to actually, with these design guidelines, and Lisa Craig's fellow consultant, Phil Thomason, who's been doing design guidelines for a lot of places throughout the country. He's also a stout preservationist, a board member of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissioners. So he knows his thing. And I just want to give a shout out to Kim Rose, because if it wasn't for her during this age of COVID, I don't think our consultants would have been able to do what they've done so far for us. So it was a great event, and I hope, encourage you all, if you couldn't participate live, to take a look on it. It's all on the YouTube. Thank you very much.
It was a good presentation. I attended, and Vince was part of that. Was Chuck in there as well? I'm sorry, it's all yeah. Well, thanks also to Chuck, even though he's not here to hear it. Yeah.
Yes, and I will tell you, Libby was there for the first one, 11:30, and she was very impressed and very, very, I think, enthusiastic with what she heard. So I thought that was great.
Great. All right. Thank you, Holly. Any questions for Holly about the Resilient Nantucket? And as she said, they're already there on YouTube on the town's channel, if you wanted to pick that up. Then we have some upcoming events. Emily Molden, I see that you are here if you wanted to say anything about the Land Council State of the Harbor event coming up on Thursday. And then we also have the Climate Change Awareness Walks from the Conservation Foundation on the 25th and 26th. And Mass Audubon is doing an event at the high school, Sustainability at Nantucket High School. So those are, that's the 28th. Those are still coming this month. Emily, do you want to go ahead with anything? You're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Sure, Mary, thank you. And thanks everyone. And congratulations to Mary Bergman and to Holly for those programs last week. I thought that was some really great and important information to start getting out to the community. So the Nantucket Land Council's State of the Harbor Forum, which will be virtually held this Thursday at 4:30 p.m. via Zoom, is really going to take a sort of a closer look at some of the ecological and environmental work that's taking place in the harbor, but from the perspective of our changing climate and sea level rise. I think that a lot of our local science-based organizations and also the town's Natural Resources Department has been doing a lot of research for some time now that actually plays in really well to monitoring the changes that we're seeing out there from an environmental perspective. And we're just really interested in stimulating some more conversation about how those resources are going to become even more important and going to start to interact even more so with our built environment in the future, and starting to create a little bit more of a transition between the two and considering them both together. So we're excited to have Elizabeth Rush coming to speak, who I think will also be really stimulating to the conversation in general based on her experience and perspective from a lot of other communities around the country. So yeah, we just are excited to continue encouraging more conversation on the topics. Thanks. Oh, and just point of note, most of you probably know that Jen Carberg will be making a presentation, as will Vince for the town, and Jeff for the Natural Resources Department, and then RJ Turcotte from our office.
It's a busy month, yeah. And Emily, that will be recorded for later viewing, I think?
Yes, it'll be done through NCTV, and we'll have that available for later viewing as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, anything further on events? And the easiest way to register is actually through the Acclimate website. They collated all the links and put them together in one place, which is very nice. Anything else on events? Any further news for Climate Change Awareness Month? All right, seeing none. There was also a press release, coincidentally, from the Nantucket Offshore Wind, or about the Nantucket Offshore Wind Community Fund that was included in the agenda that went out. There were a couple of things in there that I wanted to highlight. The Nantucket Offshore Wind Community Fund will support local initiatives to combat the effects of global climate change and enhance coastal resiliency and protect, restore, and preserve Nantucket's cultural and historic resources. The fund has the ability to accept contributions from other wind developers or from anybody who wants to make a donation. The fund will be overseen by a group consisting of the town, the Maria Mitchell Association, and the Nantucket Preservation Trust. And what I noted was that the group that put this together, while included the town, it didn't specifically include anybody advocating or representing coastal resilience or climate change. And I wondered if there was a position there that ought to be advocated for, that we can create a representation for those issues within the town portion of that management. So as much as I respect the other goals, I'd want to make sure that we weren't forgotten for lack of representation in using those funds. Holly, do you have a comment there?
I just want to mention that I was involved with all that from a town's perspective as a preservation planner, as the, this all came about because of the review process through the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 for Section 106. We are a National Historic Landmark. We wouldn't have the notoriety, if you will, the push support for what that initiative. And so I think what you see in that press release is a great thing from many aspects. I think it was stressed multiple times in many avenues that not just the historic preservation is an important function and means of protecting our National Historic Landmark, but also coastal resiliency. So I would just want to mention that although nobody from the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee was involved in that process, obviously the town, understands the importance of it. So I just wanted to mention that.
Holly, do you know if the town's membership in that committee is established already?
It hasn't been established yet. I think I agree with Holly. I think it was front and center of the work groups and negotiation groups' concerns. We are very fortunate that we were able to, put this fund together. It was something that BOEM wasn't really, all that keen on to start, and to end up with it as we did was great. And to get some of the other concessions to move the, move things, we were very fortunate, and we were very well represented.
Right, and then the final item in the press release, the first grants might be issued in late 2021. Well, of course, immediately what springs to mind is that's when our coastal resilience plan should be finalized and offer a list of projects. So, perhaps we can hope that there might be some funding for some of those recommended projects that comes from this source. Anyone else have comments or questions on that announcement? All right, seeing none. Do we have public comment at this point? If so, please unmute yourself and state your name and what your question is. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone volunteering. Next item is committee reports. And so Gary, I think that Gary messaged me to say that he had to step away. So we have the planning board. So Fritz, does the planning board had anything come before the board that's been interesting from a coastal resiliency perspective?
Trying to think. Coastal resiliency. Nothing's come, probably, but nothing's coming to mind immediately. We have not. Well, no, I should say there have been a couple of things. At the last meeting, a project on off of Holbert Avenue, which just gave rise to a comment that I think that I made there, that we really, at the end of the meeting, to the rest of the board members, that we need to start thinking about that area and how more building, more impervious services are impacting, having the effects in that area. No discussion of it. I just kind of said we really ought to be thinking about that, and it was in the context of the next annual town meeting. I don't really think we're probably going to come up with anything, but I just can't always, whenever I can, just kind of push the idea so that starts moving around in people's heads that at some point we may need to be thinking about it. But I don't anticipate there's going to be any big article in at annual town meeting dealing with this. Okay. I see Holly smiling. So.
Thank you, Fritz. Conservation Committee, we don't have Ian today. Peter, the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, has anything interesting happened there recently?
We've been caught up with two different things. I don't know if this has any relevance, but number one, we're trying to tweak the live aboard regulations for people who live aboard boats in the harbor. I don't know what bearing that has on coastal resilience. We've also been working on possibly changing the nub rule for scallops, proposed by a scalloper. We're still discussing that, and I don't know what relevance that has, but maybe.
Okay. All right, thank you, Peter. Matt from the Select Board.
Yeah, nothing. I'm trying to think. I'm not really prepared, but we did discuss. I'm trying to think anything along this lines. Come back to me.
Yeah. Jen from Conservation Foundation, anything new there regarding coastal resilience?
I can report just a little bit on a research project that we're advancing now that's looking at using kind of pilot testing an oyster reef in front of an eroding salt marsh to see if it can help stabilize the salt marsh and help the salt marsh rebuild. So that's kind of a pilot project that we're testing. I'll present a little bit about it at State of the Harbor on Thursday. But we received some funding from the Shellfish Association to move forward with the research, which was great. And we're also working with a town project or a state project to get additional funding to do the work. So it's all in the planning processes, but might be useful down the line.
Okay, great. And then Sarah or Graham, anything from your point of view? Not representing specific organizations necessarily, but.
Well, for the committee reports, I could say for the education committee that we're meeting on Friday, and the only thing we're working on right now is getting the brochure out, the homeowner guide thing, I would like to entertain additional educational opportunities, since that seems to be the only real thing that the CRAC committee can do right now. So since we're not active, being very active with the consultants, and we've kind of exhausted all the speakers that we can get to gather information, I feel like we should kind of move forward doing something with that information. So that's one thing I was going to propose for our meeting on Friday, is thinking of I feel like we need to be doing something. And so as a committee, I feel like we're learning a lot, and we talk a lot, and we listen to great talks. We're not doing any action right now. So I'm really hopeful that the education committee is where we can kind of do some action while we wait for the coastal resiliency plan to come to fruition.
Great, thank you. Graham, if you wanted to add anything, you're welcome to.
All set, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any new business?
I can come back in, Mary.
Oh, yes, Matt, thank you.
My brain turned back on. Select Board did meet in executive session regarding beach ownership and beach stuff. I can't share much of it. We've got some work done. We're doing more on that issue. A topic, sort of along this lines is, the other thing is Ashley, myself, and who else is, it's Ashley, myself, town council. We've been meeting with SBPF as a working group, trying to look at what are the, what issues need to be tackled there, and how it sort of dovetails with our group is it's very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of state law that conflicts with, with town, possibly with how the town does things or what we want to do, and trying to find a way to thread that needle in a way that we are ecologically sensitive and doing the right thing, but at the same time, sort of allowing people to, protect their homes or protect their neighborhoods is not going to be easy. And, I think I'm a little naive thinking, geez, you can bring people together and find common ground. I'm not sure you can. I hope we can. I feel good. I think when we get to the resiliency stage, I think we will. But, so that's there, there will be a report coming from that group at some point, and, it will probably be going to the CONCOM for discussion at some point and to the select board, but we aren't there yet. It's a work in progress.
So you said Ashley, you meant Ashley Erisman, the chair of CONCOM.
Ashley Erisman, myself, George Pucci, Libby's been involved in a couple. So we've had, we've met multiple times.
Thank you for the update. Any other new business? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
I'll take that as Fritz and Peter seconding.
Yep.
Roll call vote. Gary is not on the screen, so we'll say he's abstaining. Sarah?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you all.
Guys.
Mary, I don't know how you managed to get these meetings to finish exactly 2 minutes before 12. I've never seen anybody able to do that without appearing to cut people off. It's amazing.
Thank you, Fritz.
Okay, just stopping the recording now.